Winter is a great time to be out taking photos, and one of the things that I really like is that the air is very clear, and the reason for that is when the temperatures are cold, it can't hold as much moisture even at 100% humidity. So that makes for really nice, clean, clear landscape shots. And along the same lines, all that snow on the ground also helps just to clean up the environment. And so this is one of the reasons I like really coming out here at this time of the year. Another thing is right now it is 12:30. And as you can see behind me, you can still see a lot of shadow detail. That's because the sun up here in Minnesota doesn't get very high in the sky. So as long as we dress right, we can have a fantastic time out here shooting. So what is the biggest challenge that you're going to run into with shooting this time of year? Well, the biggest thing is all of the snow back here is going to turn gray. And if you've ever taken photos, especially if you use one of the program modes, you've probably noticed that you get this nice gray snow that you really don't like. It's not that your camera's doing anything wrong, it's just adjusting for middle gray. And so we need to do some things to allow our camera to know that we really want to have those white areas in the photo to be white. And whether you're shooting in program mode or shooting manual, there's a couple of things you could do. So we'll talk about those and what to do in both cases.
Using this scene as an example, we've got some highlights and some shade, and just being in aperture priority mode, what I notice is that things are pretty gray. And we can see the histogram in the shot, and you have to remember that on all of these cameras, this is really a simulation or a computation of what it thinks histogram would look. And when we look at it in Lightroom, we can see it is actually even a little bit darker than what that histogram was showing. Now if I move up to +1, so using that exposure compensation, I can see a much brighter photo, and the histogram here looks a little bit better. But when I look at Lightroom again, it's a little darker, but actually I like that histogram. I think that would work. So what if I go to +2, and now with the exposure compensation set to +2, I can see a much brighter image. And it almost looks like there are some things that are blown out. In fact, that histogram would indicate that. But when I bring it into Lightroom, I can now see that that does in fact look pretty good. Now, one of the questions you might have is, so how do I do this exposure compensation? Well, there should be, on most cameras, a little button that has a plus and a minus on it in a box. Looks something like this. And by pressing that down, you can then turn one of the dials on your camera to both increase or decrease the exposure compensation, usually in 1/3 of a stop increments. Some cameras, some of the more basic or entry-level cameras, you might have to go into the menu to do that. If I'm shooting in manual mode, I have a lot more control over what I want the settings to be and how bright the scene is going to be that the camera produces. Now, in this case, I have 1/200th of a second at f11, and when I look at the histogram, that does look pretty good. There's a little bit of a gap on the right-hand side, but that certainly looks workable. But when I go and bring this into Lightroom, what I notice is that the image is just a little bit dark. Let's make this image brighter by going to 1/125th, so 2/3 slower of a shutter speed, and looking what that looks like. The histogram looks pretty good, but I think maybe a 1/100th would be better. But now it looks like it might be blowing things out. But as I look between the two, I think 1/100th is probably where I want to be. If I take that shot and now look at this in Lightroom, what I'm going to see is that I do in fact have the histogram that I want. And you might be wondering, why was it that I knew that was going to happen? Well, a lot of that's just being familiar with your equipment and knowing what that histogram that's showing up when you're shooting really means, as I mentioned before, is just a simulation. And so if we look at photo after we have finished editing it, zooming in, we can see we can bring all of that detail out, and that actually looks really good in terms of the exposure of that snow.
So from that, you can see that just by giving our camera a little bit of extra guidance, we can create some really nice winter photos with some really nice white snow in the scene and not have that gray and dingy snow. So I think I'm going to walk around a little bit, see what other shots I can get. It is a beautiful day. I've got a little bit of sun still to work with. I think the clouds are going to move in here pretty soon, and I'm going to lose that really nice light that's hitting a lot of the snow, but especially the snow and the trees. So I'm going to walk around, grab a few more photos, and I'll create a little slideshow that you'll see in just a second. Well, thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. And just remember, when you're out shooting in snowy conditions, you need to just make sure that you're allowing for the snow and that you're getting nice white snow. And that can either be through exposure compensation if you are shooting in one of the program modes, and actually shooting aperture priority for landscapes is a really good way to go, because you can really control your depth of field and it takes a lot of the guesswork out of your settings. Or if you're shooting manual, just make sure that you're watching your highlights and just getting those highlights as close as you can to that right hand side of the histogram, and you'll be fine. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like. If you'd like to know about more videos, go ahead and hit subscribe. I put out about one a month, usually around the middle of the month sometime. Thanks for watching. Bye.